Ladies and gentlemen, in the state of Indiana, it is legal to have sex with 15-year-olds because they are not mature enough to handle it and make good decisions regarding it. This case is about the seduction of such girl. On April 18, 2012, at approximately 7 p.m., the victim Taylor Terry's seduction began. She was walking with her friend Kat Hyde when they saw the defendant, 27-year-old Jack Trudeau, otherwise known as Ziggy, sitting at an abandoned house. Kat knew Ziggy and thought it would be a good idea to go up and spend some time with him at the house. Ziggy greeted them and proceeded to ask the age of Taylor, to which she responded 15 years old. After using the restroom, Taylor headed for the stairs to look for Kat when Ziggy stopped her in the doorway and didn't let her pass. He then asked if she wanted to listen to music. She felt uncomfortable about the situation but decided to proceed anyway because Kat told her that he was cool. Ziggy then led her to the dark room in the abandoned house. He then straddled her on the bed and began removing clothing. They had sexual intercourse, leaving Taylor, as she put it, scared. He just did it without any warning. I felt dirty, felt wrong, I just laid there. I felt like I couldn't move or say anything. She had just been lured into a dark house with a stranger playing guitar by a 27-year-old man pretending to be a 17-year-old boy. This case is about straight-up seduction. Ziggy knew that Taylor was only 15 years old, and like the true predator he is, he proceeded anyway. Taylor was able to easily identify him during her statement. How do we know that Trudeau knows his real age? He confirmed his birthday and age to the police officer during the report on April 22, 2012. He confirmed his birthday and age to the psychiatrist weeks after that. He confirmed his birthday and age to Monica Lovejoy, his girlfriend of 6 months, many months before this even began. In fact, ladies and gentlemen, it appears that the only time this man doesn't know his real age is when he's trying to seduce a 15-year-old girl into having sex with him. Through a matter of months, his birthday and age has stayed constant 4 different times. He knows that he is 27 years old and that it is wrong to have intercourse with a 15-year-old. The state plays no part in proving the defendant was sane at the time of the offense. It is the defense counsel's obligation to prove that he was insane. The judge will instruct you if you are firmly convinced of the truth of the matter asserted. Then the state has proven its case beyond reasonable doubt. When you are firmly convinced of the truth of the matter, and after you consider all the evidence, we ask that you find the defendant guilty, a verdict that is consistent with truth and justice.
Ladies and gentlemen of the court, you have now heard the evidence that shed light on what happened in this case. I ask you now to reflect on what you have heard and remind you that this case is not a question of consent. We are also not contesting that our client engaged in some sexual actions with the woman you see here today. What we are asking you to decide is if my client, Jack Trudeau, was legally excused for his actions due to being mentally insane. The state has suggested to you that my client, Jack, manipulated Miss Terry into staying and engaging in sexual activity. This is not what the court has proved here today. During this case, we had the ability to hear the woman's story of the events that occurred. I would like to highlight on a few of these issues. When Miss Terry first met my client, she was walking with her friend Kat. Her friend had already conversed with my client at least once before proceeding to see my client again. It can be inferred that she felt comfortable around him. Knowing about this previous meeting, Miss Terry trusted him as well. She even felt comfortable enough with my client to enter the abandoned house and wander around the house alone. She also felt comfortable enough to spend alone time with my client. Never during this time did it alarm Miss Terry that her friend Kat did not enter the residence and that she did not know where she was. I suggest that the court has proved something else. I suggest that the evidence of the court shows that this was an innocent encounter, innocent on both sides. My client believes that he is a 17-year-old boy and thus allowed these events to occur. My client did not know his actions were wrong and had no intention to engage in wrongful actions. He simply did not understand them. During my client's psychological evaluation, he was asked why the alleged crimes he was being charged with were wrong. To this, my client answered, "Sex is bad, I guess." He had no understanding of the importance of the age difference, or that there even was much of an age difference. I ask the court to recall Dr. Grimes' expert testimony. Dr. Grimes diagnosed Jacques Tordeau with bipolar affective disorder with psychotic symptoms. This means that my client is not in a mental state that is able to understand the wrongfulness of his actions. In my client's mind, he is a 17-year-old boy who has aspirations to become popular in the music industry. As a 17-year-old boy, he engaged in sexual activities with the woman you see here in court today. However, he did not do so understanding the wrongfulness of his actions. This calls into account the mens rea necessary for the state to prove in order to convict my client. In every criminal case, the state carries the burden of proof of the following elements: the mens rea, actus reus, ID, date, time, and location. One of these elements the state cannot prove beyond a reasonable doubt. That is the mens rea of my client. The literal translation of mens rea is guilty-minded. The state has chosen to try and convince you that my client had a knowingly guilty mind. Thus, it is the state's burden to prove that my client Jacques had a clear sense of events that occurred at the time of the crime, and that he chose to engage in them regardless. Although we are not contesting that Jacques engaged in sexual activity with Miss Terry, we are contesting his state of mind. From the evidence that was presented to you today, it is clear that Jacques did not know the wrongfulness of his actions. Thus, the mens rea element of the crime cannot be proved beyond a reasonable doubt. The state has made an argument before you that suggested that my client knowingly engaged in relations with a woman as an adult. This is not the case. Jacques Tordeau suffers from a disease that alters his perception of the world. I ask the jury to think for a moment how their lives would be impacted if they were to have this disease. What would it change about your life? Would you still be sitting here today, living in the homes you do, able to have a healthy family environment? Would you seek help? My client wants help. He wants to be normal. If convicted, he will not receive the treatment and help he needs. I ask you now to give my client the opportunity at a better life. Vote a non-guilty verdict by reason of insanity so that my client will have the opportunity to seek the help he never knew existed for him. Thank you for your time.
As previously mentioned, this case is not about consent, but rather age. The facts are that Mr. Tordeau, a 27-year-old man, seduced a 15-year-old girl into having sex with him. Taylor was alarmed by her friend Kat's absence from the house due to the fact that she was looking for her when Ziggy stopped her in the doorway. Furthermore, Mr. Tordeau was able to recall his birthday 4 different times, all on separate instances. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not by chance. He knows he is 27 years old. The burden of proof for insanity needs to be more than what took place. A 90-minute conversation cannot create a medical diagnosis. The only evidence the defense can bring together to show insanity are the self-serving words of the defendant and his mother. And do not think for a second that a man that would lie to get girls in bed and a woman that brings girls in her house for her son to manipulate would hesitate to come into this courtroom and lie to each and every one of you.